Jimi Hendrix was born in Seattle in 1942 and grew up in a predominantly white community. His parents divorced in 1950. Jimi spent much of his childhood with his grandmother, a full-blooded Cherokee. Hendrix was a shy and introverted boy. When he was 12, his father bought him his first electric guitar. Learning from the rock and roll hits on the radio, he taught himself to play. In 1961, he joined the paratroopers, but 14 months later, he was discharged after injuring himself during a parachute jump. For the next 3 years, Hendrix played with any band that would have him, working the network of black clubs and theaters known as the Chitlin Circuit.
You have to remember that this lad had been on stage with a lot of very influential blues players in America. He'd worked with the Isley Brothers, he'd worked with Ike and Tina Turner, he'd worked with Little Richard, doing the Chitlin Circuit in America. That's got to rub off on you. I mean, if you don't entertain on them shows, they throw things at you. So you've got to learn to entertain damn quick. And it all just came to fruition with two little lads from England.
As is the way with musicians, we just sort of dug up all our heroes and compared them. And we actually thought the same. And he liked Robert Johnson, he liked Freddie and B.B. King, and he liked Buddy Guy. He liked all the same people. And he just seemed to be conversant in all this. I mean, it was such a thrill for me because it was all secondhand. In reality, for me, it was something that I learned from records. This guy had been amongst them and was one of them.
I don't know if he idolized me as a musician, but he seemed to respect what I did. And so if he did something bluesy, that's the thing that he would play for me, and he'd play it so his attack to a guitar, man, was, oh, something else. Yeah, I think of one of the great American pitchers or ball players or one of the great fighters of the world, you know. That's the way he would attack any note on his guitar.
I got to see Jimi for the first time in '69 in Seattle, because I lived in Seattle at the time. And it's just the wildest music I've ever heard. I mean, it's just really, after that first assembly, I went and bought Are You Experienced? And living in Virginia, I mean, we were playing soul music and things like that, and it was just a completely different way of an approach to a guitar. And I was really thrilled by it.
I think really what it was he was making these extraordinary futuristic guitar sounds, but also you could hear almost the whole history of the blues in them or something. There was some connection between the blues history and the guitar and the way that Jimi was taking it into the future.
But Jimi played blues and played it well. And he played good blues. He just did it Jimi Hendrix way, which was Jimi Hendrix.
one-way player. I played strict Chicago blues, you know. I'd never tried to cross it with anything. And he had this melting pot going on that he'd drawn from different places that I did try and pick up on.
Well, I was pretty young and impressionable at that time, and I would sit and listen to his records as much as I could. And, you know, I'd sit and learn all the licks and everything in my room. My mother would ask what the hell was going on downstairs, you know. I had this big room. I had my stereo cranked up loud. And I swear, man, I had a lot of that stuff down note for note. I was really into Jimmy's music a whole lot. And for me, it just like, it opened up. It just opened up all kinds of avenues and different ways of going about playing guitar.
You know, he used to get up in the morning to go and fry himself at breakfast, and he'd be frying bacon and eggs with a guitar on. He took the guitar around. That lad never had a guitar off less than 8 hours every day, plus the gig at night. He'd take the guitar to the loo with him because he liked the sound of the echo in there, and he'd sit in there sometimes for hours just playing the Fender guitar and not plugged in because he liked the sound of coming off the tiles in the loo. He had a guitar on all the time. All the time. He was the best guitarist in the world because he wanted to be the best, and he was prepared to work at it.
After their success at Monterey, the Experience were booked at the Fillmore in San Francisco, the top underground club on the West Coast.
Jefferson Airplane were top of the bill. Jimmy was second, and Big Brother and the Holding Company were the opening act. We'd done 2 nights there, and Jefferson Airplane cried off because Jimmy just crucified them, murdered them on stage. And they pulled out of the last show, and we got back to the hotel after the second show, after being told that they would be topping the bill on the last night. And we were really ecstatic. It had been a fantastic night. And we got a phone call from Mike Jeffrey in New York to tell us he pulled off this fantastic deal, that he'd got them on the Monkees tour. And Jimmy and I just sat there stunned. We couldn't believe he'd done this. I mean, the Monkees.
I thought it was great because the Monkees were huge in America at that point. They had their own aeroplane with Monkees written on the side, so I thought that was lovely. And we got little things saying Monkees, touring, party, and all that rubbish. But we didn't actually go down that well because it was a whole different crowd altogether.
And I just said, well, I'm getting them off this tour. Now, Dick Clark was promoting that tour, and he agreed with me that it was a terrible mismatch. And the two of us sat there and cooked up this tale about the Daughters of the American Revolution that made complaints about it. Now, Daughters of the American Revolution in them days were anybody's Aunt Sally. I mean, they thought Barry Goldwater was a pinko, you know? And it was a good thing to hang it on. So we put out this story, and the next thing you knew, it was like sort of front page news everywhere.
I don't think there was any doubt that there was a concerted effort on the part of the publicity machine around Jimmy at the time to cause a little bit of moral indignation within the context of the media and some of the pillars of the establishment at the time. Because, I mean, that's one of the things that immediately gets the kids on your side. I mean, it worked with the Stones, it worked with the Sex Pistols, it worked with Jimi Hendrix.
I want to hear and see everything. I want to hear and see everything.
From mid-1967, for the next 2 years, the Jimi Hendrix Experience toured non-stop, establishing themselves as one of the most successful live acts of all time.
Oh, shucks.
As an artist is generating publicity, his album's going up the chart. Your first section of the tour might be in 2,000 or 3,000 seater auditoriums. The next section might be in 5,000 seaters. By the time we finished that 68 thing, we're doing big arenas and state fairs, and he was topping the bill, and we were picking up like $100,000 a night by the end of that tour.
This guy, Mike Jeffries, who managed us all, was a remarkable guy. And he and Jimmy had figured out, I think, that to tour a band around the United States using air transport was really not that much different from touring it around London using road transport. And so we zigzagged to and fro, up and down, north, south, east, west, you know, across America. And you'd be in swimming in Arizona in the morning, and in the afternoon you'd get out in a blizzard in Canada.
Is this true? Please let me talk to you. I just want to know about the rooms behind your minds. Do I see a vacuum you there, or am I growing blind? Or is it just remains for vibrations, echoes long ago? Things like love the world and let your fancy flow. Is this true?
If you're touring in that manner, there's basically no time to relax, because like you get on the plane, you go to the place, you go and do a press reception, you go to the hotel, you have a bath, you go and do a gig, you go to a club, you find a young lady or she finds you, you go back home, and then whatever else follows, and then you get up at 8 o'clock, you get on the plane, go to the next place, go to a club, and you do that for about 3 months. You do tend to get very tired. I've never seen so many women in my life. And I was only 20 years old. Like, from when we started, there was women everywhere, and that escalated, especially when we went to America later on. That got a bit silly then, you know, with the ladies.
Woo! What's a lady? Fox a lady.
I used to always say to Jimmy, you should have a revolving door in your bedroom. There's not much more to say. It was a different time, you know. It was the era of the 3 Ps, wasn't it, you know? Penicillin cured everything. The pill, which induced promiscuity.
Like if I'll get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and I'm not, you know, I'm really sleepy, but then I open the door and see somebody that appeals to me, you know. Or like, first of all, thinking of all white trash person, I say, what in the world is she doing here, you know? Or what does she, you know, want or something like that. I stand there, she says, oh, maybe, can I come in? And I'm standing there and really digging her, you know, she's really nice looking, you know. To tell the honest to God truth, like, she's about 19, 20 or, you know, beyond the age of so-and-so. And so I said, oh, well, I'll probably stand there, and then there I go, I'll be biting into an apple maybe or something, you know. Tell us the truth. That's the way I am, because, like...
Really, it was the first band where you've got a young black guy in some position of power that was, you know, I mean, white girls liked him as well, right. You know.
There again, black girls liked us.
That's right, you know. It was a threat to the authority, you know. They just didn't like what was going down.
We were down in Louisiana once, and me being English, not knowing about the, as you say, the black situation, we stopped someplace, we were going to get some cheese and some beers or something in his place, and we stopped. And myself and Mitch went in this shop. It was a redneck place, Louisiana, and all these guys, we had hair and pink suits, and Hendrix wouldn't get out of the car. He wouldn't come in. We said, come on, what's wrong? No, man. And that's when I started realizing I didn't know nothing about it, being English, you see. So.
You find out, like, the guy driving the car was one of, like, the big Ku Klux Klan member. And so Hendrix would know this. And so you make sure he sat in the front of the car with the guy chauffeuring him, you know.
Yeah, people used to say to me, Mitchell, like, what's it like playing with a black guy? I'm saying, well, I don't know. He's a guitar player, you know. We didn't consider him being black. I considered him being American.
We were in a bar in Virginia, and it was, as far as I can remember, Jimmy and Mitch and Noel and Mike Ratledge of Soft Machine, Robert Wyatt, and various other people. And the woman who was serving the drinks told us that Martin Luther King had just been assassinated. And there were these guys at the bar opening bottles of wine and drinking to the health of the assassin. And of course, you immediately find yourself wondering what your role should be. You want to kind of go in there and do something. You're so outraged, you know. And I remember turning and looking at Jimmy, who was just staring away into space as though nothing had happened. And I realized, of course, that these guys were just waiting, probably trying to prompt some reaction from Jimmy and from us, you know, so that they could beat us up. So we left the bar. I was actually terrified, totally terrified. I felt I'd grown 20 years older in 2 minutes, you know. And we went back to New York. And the following night, we were due to play at Newark in New Jersey. And nobody wanted to go. There were riots in the streets in New York, and cars were being overturned. And Jimmy said the last time we'd been in Newark, there were tanks on the street, and the whole city was on fire. And so everyone was pretty scared. At least I suppose they all were. I certainly was. And then the police came on the phone and said that there was a vast crowd gathered at the auditorium, and that if we didn't show up, they thought they'd burn the city down. And so the driver of the main Cadillac took this cheroot out of his mouth, I always remember, and said, "Jimmy sits up front with me or I don't go." So Jimmy sat up in front with this guy, the driver, and the rest of us white guys all cowered down in the back of the car, and we drove off through the empty streets of Newark like that. And when we got to the auditorium, there was a really vast crowd. I was doing the projections for Soft Machine out in the actual auditorium, so I knew you couldn't move. All the aisles were packed and so on. And I was thinking, what do I do if someone suddenly stands up and points a gun at Jimmy? Because we all thought that there was some kind of conspiracy going on to eliminate people who were seen as enemies of some kind of dream of America that had never really been. And that killing of Kennedy and the killing of Martin Luther King were actually that. And it seemed to us that Hendrix too might be seen in that light as representing this youth culture and a black culture that they seem to hate so much. But of course I realized that there was nothing I could do if someone did stand up with a gun. And then Soft Machine did a great set, and then Hendrix came out to enormous applause. And then he said, "This number is for a friend of mine." And he abandoned completely his normal set, and just the band played an improvisation, which was absolutely hauntingly beautiful. Immediately, everybody knew what this was about. I mean, this was a lament for Martin Luther King. And within minutes, the whole audience was weeping, and the much maligned old redneck stagehands came onto the side of the stage, and they were standing there too with tears running down their face. The music had I describe it as having a kind of appalling beauty. It was harrowing music. And of course, when you try to get a tape of it, for once, nobody was making a pirate recording. There is no record of that thing. And when he came to the end of the music, there was no applause. He just put his guitar around. The whole audience was sobbing. And he just walked quietly off the stage, and we all got out and got into the Cadillacs and drove away.
The strangest thing for me was I was never aware of how much dope they were putting down their throats.
Now the smiling portrait of you is still hanging on my frowning wall. It really doesn't bother me too much at all.
Jimmy never seemed to be high or anything. I didn't find out until after we completed Access Boulders Love that he'd been taking acid. And this is a guy that was living in the same flat as me. You just couldn't tell with Jimi. He seemed to just cruise through anything that came along.
So, I mean, everyone was sort of involved with pot and stuff like that, and LSD was very important at the time. Everyone was either taking LSD, thinking about taking LSD. There were the people who hadn't taken it and the people who had taken it, so to speak. But that was an important drug. But the actual hard drugs weren't important at all, and they weren't really around very much at all. And as you know, I mean, LSD is not a sort of drug you get strung out on. I mean, it's not something one wants to take every day.
We were playing in Kiel or somewhere near Hamburg, 67, and Hendrix had taken something, or someone had given him something. And we sort of wandered on stage, and I noticed that he was just standing there laughing, right? He couldn't tune the guitar, so I had to put the bass down, go over across there, get the guitar off him, tune it backwards for him, right? Hand it to him, and he just sort of sat on the chair laughing because he was tripping or whatever. And he couldn't sing or nothing. And in those days, I couldn't sing. I just did backing vocals or whatever. But luckily, I could speak a bit of German. So we fumbled a few songs, you know, without vocals. And then, like, in the end, I had to sort of say in German that he's a bit ill. He's ein bisschen krank and wir must gehen jetzt. And we split quick.
The Jimi Hendrix Experience recorded only 3 studio albums. Are You Experienced and Axis Boulder's Love, both released in 1967, and the 1968 album Electric Ladyland.
It was great in the studio, especially the early days, before we got into the Electric Ladyland album, because it was so spontaneous. Everything was done in 1 and 2 takes. I mean, Are You Experienced album, I mean, when you really count up the hours, it was recorded and mixed in maybe 60 hours in the studio in total. Axis Boulder's Love, maybe 80 hours in the studio. I mean, in fact, when we did Axis Boulder's Love, we brought the master tapes home this night from the studio, and Jimi went off to a party and took them with him to play it to some friends. These are the masters. Come back in the taxi, he lost the B-side somewhere. He got back with only the A-side of the album, so we had to go in there and we made arrangements for cutting time. And we went back in the studio the next night and mixed the whole album again in 4.5 hours.
The third album, Electric Ladyland, that was mainly recorded in America. That's when things got very sour.
He didn't give any thought to the amount of money that was being spent in either on studios or limousines or anything else, you know. And didn't appreciate that a producer's role, as Chaz's was to bring things in on a budget.
It was like living in a circus at the end of the day. Mike Jeffries, who was like my associate partner, whatever at the time, he started taking a lot of LSD, and Jimi and him became like acid buddies. They were discussing the different concoctions, what to take one day after the other. It was madness in the office. What with Mitch and Noel were doing all sorts of things by it. Obviously, I was aware they were doing drugs by this time. Never did they realize just how much they were putting down, but it was impossible to talk to these people. They were always, somebody was always on a trip, and trying to talk to your partner and the artist. You know, you say to the artist one day, for God's sake, you got to stop this. You got to do your brain in. And 20 minutes later, your partner's coming in and they're discussing what they're going to take that afternoon. And I just thought, well, I kept warning him if he didn't cool her out, I was going to split.
And then sometimes we turn up and there'd be like 50 people in the control room. And I'll be saying, excuse me, could I sit somewhere? I'm just the bass player. Who are you, man? So, like, things got pretty hairy, and there was a few heavy verbals between myself and Hendrix about that fact.
Sort of all the decisions were avoided. I would say that's it, you know, it's done, take 3, that's it. But they'd want to go on to take 50. And it just drove you mad. I was sitting there straight as a die, having to suffer one track, one performance after the other, which you could literally not tell any difference between, except the longer it went on, the fire seemed to be going out of the performance to me.
Yeah, that whole LP means so much. It wasn't just slopped together. Every little thing that you hear on there means something. It's not no game that we're playing, trying to blow the public's mind or so forth. It's a thing that we really, really mean. It's part of us, another part of us.
It wasn't desperation. I just said, hey, I've had it, I'm off. I thought it was the only thing I could do to try and pull him out of it. And that was it. I just came back to England.
His courage came from a fantastic conviction that whatever he did was absolutely correct, And it wasn't, it was never done in a malicious way. He never meant anyone any harm, but he would do anything he felt like doing at any time, irrespective of what it was supposed to be. And that is going on and supposedly to perform Hey Joe on the Lulu show and then dedicating that, playing Sunshine of Your Love because the Cream had broken up. It was actually the same day, I think, and that he got the news and just decided to do that and sod everyone else,
Prior to the show, which was live, we were all in the toilet having our bit of smoke, as they say, and it fell down the sink. So panic everywhere. We were trying to open the bottom of the sink and everything. So we had to get a maintenance man from the BBC television. We said we dropped a ring down the sink and, well, I'll get it back. I said, no, give me the thing. I'll do it myself. So we got the bit of smoke back and we were okay.
We'd like to stop playing this rubbish and dedicate a song to the Cream, regardless of what kind of group they might be in. We'd like to dedicate it to Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker, and Jack Bruce.
It was meteoric for him. He really shot up there very quickly and was constantly in demand. And I don't think he ever really gave himself time to kind of unwind or do a lot of the things he wanted to do. When you're at that kind of peak, you're just flashing everywhere and life loses reality, And I think that may have been a bit disturbing for him towards the end, in that he probably was hard put to find a good direction to go in, It was like just being shunted from pillar to post.
Yeah, once a band does become successful, I think you're expected to do, as in Hendrix, the guitar smashing, the biting bit. Used to put my teeth on edge. And after a while, Hendrix did get a bit sick of the fact that he was expected to do this certain act, and that did get to him, but it got to all of us, really.
Jimmy, how much do you rely on gimmicks?
Gimmicks, there we go again. Gimmicks, man. I'm tired of people saying we rely on gimmicks. What is this? The world is nothing but a big gimmick, isn't it? Wars, napalm bombs and all that. People get burned up on TV and it's nothing but a big gimmick. Yes, we do.
He
had done, up to a certain point, what he wanted to do musically, really, which culminated in Electric Ladyland album. The things he did after that, he felt himself that he was repeating certain things. He wanted to go somewhere else musically. He was very much trying to do this. And this period was, for him, a period of frustration and probably a lot of unhappiness. He may have got more involved with drugs during that period. But again, I don't think in a very sort of addictive, obsessive way. What he was obsessive about was making the next musical change in his life.
The thing is nowadays, anybody can protest, you know, and anybody can write beautiful songs and all that. But sometimes if you have a talent or if people are noticing you enough, then you should really try to do as much as you possibly can with it, you know. Like what we're going to do now is chop down the words now and try to make it really tight. And what we're saying is not protesting, but giving the answers or some kind of solution.
By now, Hendrix, though apolitical himself, had become a potent symbol for America's radical youth movement at a time of mass civil rights rallies and anti-Vietnam demonstrations.
Big deal.
Well, I think that is probably the curse of genius. That you know you are alone. You know, no one can understand the depths that you go to when you reach down inside yourself to play, you know, or to express. You can't take anyone with you to those places, and it's sometimes you find things that are very scary. And I think you have to survive that on your own, and that is a very lonely experience. And it's not something you choose. It's not something that you necessarily would go after. It's something you inherit with your gift, and he had it in Aces, you know. It did make him very lonely, and I don't think, even with other musicians of his caliber, and there weren't many, and perhaps there weren't any, you know. I mean, I tried to get close to him, but there was always a kind of barrier, you know, that wasn't of his making, I'm sure. It's just that's the way it is when you're that great.
Last gig, June 1969, right, Denver. We arrived there, jumped on a plane from LA to Denver, and checked into the hotel. I went upstairs, and there's some journalist in the restaurant or the bar where I was having a meal and whatever, and he said, "Oh, you still with the band?" I said, "What do you mean?" "Of course I'm still with the band." He said, "Didn't you read the paper or something?" He said that Hendrix had announced to the press that he was going to extend his band by adding brass and keyboard, etc., etc., and he was thinking of adding other members. And I said, "What do you mean?" You know, because Hendrix had said nothing to me. So I did the gig and left. That was it. On the plane back to England.
The experience broke up in June 1969. For the next 15 months, Hendrix played with a succession of different musicians. He played Woodstock with a pickup group, including Mitch Mitchell, and then formed a band of Gypsies, a short-lived experiment with an old army friend Billy Cox on bass and Buddy Miles on drums. Collaborations were also planned with Gil Evans and Miles Davis, but these came to nothing.
And you'll be going just the same, 3 times the pain, and your own self to blame. Lord, your sugar.
heard that he was taking lots of dope of different varieties and becoming slightly unreliable or just kind of more mysterious, you know, that he would be kind of, he would disappear or he would just walk off or he would do unaccountable things.
Hendrix came back to England in August 1970 to play the Isle of Wight Festival.
And then back in London, it was a Wednesday night. He came to the flat that I was still living in the flat that we'd shared. And he came to see my son, who was just been born, who was only a few months old at the time. He'd never seen the child. And he came up to the flat and we sat talking and he asked us to come back and produce him again. And we sat talking till 2, 3 that morning. He discussing. He said he felt that he wasn't satisfied with what he'd been recording in the year 15 months since we parted company, and he couldn't really see what he'd done. And I said, well, I'm going up to Newcastle on Friday. You go to New York on Friday. Bring all your tapes back to London, and we'll go into the studio and start sifting through them and find out what's on there.
I was in bed after a very serious, heavy night in New York. There was a phone call, and this girl who I knew, she said, a friend of yours is dead.
When I got off the train in Newcastle, my father was at the station. And I thought, well, what the hell are you meeting us off the train for? I mean, I've been coming up to Newcastle all these years. He'd never met me off the train before. I said, what you doing here? And he said, well, I thought I'd better meet you to get you past all the reporters. I says, what are you talking about, all the reporters? He says, well, don't you know? I says, don't I know what? He says, Jimmy's dead. And it was just, wow, I just couldn't believe it. We sat there on the Wednesday night and planned what we're going to do in the future. And there he was dead. I just stunned. It was like running into a brick wall.
And like, it's the first time in my life someone who I'd known had died, right? So, and then I had all these women come into my room who wanted to commit suicide they wanted to jump out of my window, and they were serious about it. And I was very shook up, so I'm not religious, but I went to a church, and I took all these women to a cocktail bar, and we all got rotten. And, but I still think about it, and it still upsets me.
Jimi Hendrix spent the night of September the 17th, 1970, at the Notting Hill flat of his girlfriend, Monica Danneman. After a late dinner, they went to bed. In the morning, Monica found him unconscious and called an ambulance. Hendrix died shortly afterwards at St. Mary Abbott's Hospital. The coroner returned an open verdict. The immediate cause of death was inhalation of vomit brought on by sleeping pills and alcohol. There was no evidence of hard drugs. His body was flown back to Seattle, where he was buried on the 1st of October 1970. He was 27 years old.
I didn't mean to take up all your sweet time. I'll give it right back one of these days. If I don't see you no more in this world, I'll make sure the next one don't be there. Don't be there. I'm a little child,
I don't know, I just wish he was still here. Because at the time, when you look back at it, it just seemed such a carefree life. And for a disaster to happen like that was so unpredictable. And I've told this before, but when When they told me he was dead, I was fucking angry as shit. I'd never been angry, and I'm not an angry person, but I was angrier than I'd ever been, because I felt betrayed. I felt like he'd let me down, although it obviously wasn't a conscious decision for him to die. I felt suddenly the loneliest person on earth.
If I think of Jimi, I always think of him with a smile on his face. To me, the image in that that's been portrayed since his death is this tragic character. And Jimi's death was a tragedy, but his life was full of fun.
Well, you know it's too bad, little girl, it's too bad. Too bad we have to part.
How did he turn out to be the way he was? I mean, he's still leading everybody, you know, with what he's doing. I don't think there's going to be anybody that's going to have that much importance as Jimi Hendrix has had for a long time to come.